coach can say anything he wants within reason. I've got no problem with that. But no, don't tell me it's raining when you know what. Good morning to you. Good Wednesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into hockey and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Penguins and Pirates in the same place that you found this. This football team has the same primary problem that it's had ever since Deontay Johnson was traded to the Panthers for Dante Jackson. That is not my expression of regret for that exchange. I think Jackson's been pretty good through 5 games, and that's before he caught that really easy interception from Dak Prescott the other night. And what's more, I'd had enough of the whole running backwards after the catch and the drops in the big games and the big situations. But that's fine. That's fine. Don't tell me, as Mike Tomlin told everyone yesterday at his press conference, that everything's just swell with this positional group. And believe it or not, I'm actually not bringing up George Pickens here. That consumed, and not without cause, about half of his press conference. That's not what I'm talking about today. George, for whatever his failings are, and they seem to be growing by the week, he's a legitimate NFL wide receiver. You can have a debate as to whether or not he's a true number one or whatever. You don't wonder if he's got the capability to play the position at this level, whereas the rest of these guys aren't getting anything done or almost anything done. But here, I'm going to play you Tomlin's entire response when asked about the receiving depth behind George.
I like the contributions of different guys over at different times. There have been moments. Calvin had a big game a couple weeks ago. If you're talking specifically about the passing game, you can't exclude Muth. We've just did long-term contract business with Muth. He's a tight end, but he is a receiver in that he is a central component of what we do in the passing game. I am comfortable with the contributions of the collective, but I acknowledge who does what week in and week out might not be overly predictable, but I don't necessarily view that as a negative. If they're capable and they're prepared, it makes them a difficult collective to prepare for. Scotty, for example, has had his moments. Van has had his moments. I like the work of all of those guys. We got Brandon in the uniform last week. He made a play or two for us. We'll keep working. They'll keep readying themselves, and I'm sure we'll get the necessary plays that we need from the collective.
I mean, what's the point of that? What's the point of even saying something like that as opposed to, I've got to get more out of these guys. I believe in them. They're working hard, but they're some of the terms that he usually uses, like, JV, not at a winning level, or we're getting it done in practices, but not in stadiums or something. Instead, everything's just, awesome. He even attempted to cite examples. That one thing that Van Jefferson did once, or there was that game that Calvin Austin had a couple of weeks ago. And then the most bizarre possible example he could have given related to Pat Freiermuth. He said, if you picked up on this, that, there's Muth. Don't forget about Muth. We just paid him a ton of money. Well, yeah, you did. So try using him. Try targeting him more than 0 times in the first half. But then, this is the kind of reaching that you do when you're saying something that you either know is not true or you're trying to kid yourself. And I don't believe for a second that it's the latter. If anything, and if you'll pardon me getting a little bit conspiratorial here, it sounds a lot like something that a general manager, not a head coach, would say if the team was in fact attempting to add someone at that position from the outside. You know how that stuff goes. Can never show your weakness. Don't want to let the other team know that, you're really bleeding, because that's when they can ask, something that's really unreasonable of you, and then that becomes your starting point that you got to work down from instead of something that's reasonable in the first place. So that makes sense. I hope it's that as opposed to some sort of, receiver blindness or something. This position, my friends, has to get addressed. And I'm sorry, I know I've been saying this ever since the Deontay trade, but it has to get addressed. And it has to get addressed really, really soon. I keep seeing and reading people referring to the NFL trade deadline. There's no reason to wait. There's no reason to see if, which teams come open on the market or which ones fall so far out of contention even this early that they'd be willing to part with somebody. Those teams exist currently. Take a look at the standings. And all it takes is one. All it takes is one willing participant, one match with one of the other 31 teams. In parentheses, although I strongly suspect you're going to have a tough time pulling off that kind of exchange within the AFC North. So we're really talking about 28 teams. But here's another way to look at it. This is whether you're Tomlin or Omar Khan, Andy Weidel, all the people that get involved in something of this scope. There's no law that says the only type of wide receiver, the only type of receiver that you can acquire has to be either a superstar or a former superstar or genuine WR1 that just slots right in there next to George or even ahead of George. I'm going to tell you where the bar is right now. The bar is at Van Jefferson. He is the bar. And I get that he's a solid run blocker. I get that everybody respects him for that. He works his rear end off, really does. But he's not a WR2 in this league. He's not close to a WR2 in this league. And what's still needed more than anything else is a WR2. And there are a lot of those out there. And they don't cost anywhere near as much. And they don't come with the kind of risk that's associated with, the Brandon Ayuk talks and Devontae Adams. And that's why, being blunt with you, what goes in one ear and out the other with me is when someone will ask, well, why should they go out and get someone like Ayuk or Adams when they're struggling this much offensively without them? Do you really think that one player can make that much of a difference? That, to me, isn't what you should be talking about. You should be talking about a way to upgrade over Van Jefferson. Just do that. You can do that. There's lots of cap space, and there's lots of wide receivers out there. Go get one. Like now. When we come back, J1Q. This segment of Daily Shot is brought to you by our good friends at Mike's Beer Bar. They're located on Federal Street, directly across from PNC Park. Mike has more than 500 beers on tap, including from more than 50 local breweries. Stop in and say hello. Tell Mike we sent you. Mike's Beer Bar. Today's J1Q comes from Niles, who says, DK, can we trade Mike Tomlin along with George Pickens? Panthers or Bears would kill for a 9-win season. I'll give you marks for the humor in there, Niles. That's actually pretty good, killing for a 9-win season. But the reason that I chose your question today is that it's one amid a sea of Tomlin criticisms, most of them not even phrased in the form of a question. It's just, I can't stand this guy. This guy's the problem. Why are you talking about this on your show instead of Tomlin? Just talk about Tomlin. One individual wrote that he's never going to listen to me again because I don't even remember what yesterday's show was about, but it wasn't about Tomlin. So that was enough for him. He'd had it. And this is, for anybody who's new around here, standard operating procedure. Team wins, head coach never gets mentioned. Team loses, everything is on the head coach. I am critical of Tomlin. I was critical of him in the opening segment of this particular program. I also will compliment him when it's warranted. I also will acknowledge his role in winning as much as I do in losing. I will also acknowledge, and this I do remember coming up on yesterday's show, that some of his short-term emphasis. Everything is about the next game. Everything is always about the next game and never about, getting better later into the season or building up. Remember that with the higher ceiling guys and letting them play, getting Roman Wilson onto the field, for example. And I assigned that, and it's just a theory on my part, as one of the reasons the Steelers have had, quite literally, no playoff success since Chris Boswell kicked 100 field goals that one day in Kansas City a few years back. But what I don't do on this show, I don't ride somebody, I don't drag somebody. There's certain people who I don't think are very good at what they do, but if they change, if they have a great game, if they have a great month, that's what you're going to hear. I don't overthink this stuff. It's one reason I don't do predictions. I'm not coming on here trying to show you how I see everything into the future and my stance from 4 months ago was dead on and whatever. I don't care. I really don't. I care about trying to be as accurate and fair as possible. And I get that Tomlin's been around a long, long time. So I get that he's going to have built up a whole slew of people who just want him gone. And they would rather have the Steelers lose, and this is a real thing, if it meant having him gone. And I'm just going to be honest with you, that's a nothing to me. That's a zip right through one ear and out the other. I don't even give it the time of day. I really don't. Do the Steelers have the perfect head coach? No. Do they have the best, most advanced, most organized, most innovative, most, I don't have an adverb for this, but most discipline instilling coach in the NFL? No. Do they have one of the better ones? Yeah. If you don't want to listen to this show because I think that, while also criticizing him in context, that right over there, my friends, is the figurative door. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Steelers. We'll be back with another one of these tomorrow.